Science can map the stars, weigh atoms, and predict eclipses. Yet it still stumbles when asked why reality feels like something from the inside. That's the spicy controversy. The biggest mystery isn't what's out there, it's who's noticing it, and why consciousness shows up at all. So this mentor's bet is counterintuitive. The universe may not be a dead machine with a few lucky brains, but a living field where awareness is baked in. If that sounds like mysticism, good, because spirituality and rigorous curiosity can be unlikely best friends on the same road to awakening. And once the reader follows that road, the impossible starts looking like a calling toward spiritual growth, healing, and inner peace. Topic 1. The mystery. Consciousness is the one thing a person can't step outside of, because even doubt happens inside awareness. A thought pops up, an emotion flares, a memory plays. Then the mind asks, who is watching this? And the soul quietly listens. That simple question nudges self-knowledge forward, like opening a tiny spiritual portal in an ordinary afternoon. A practical move. They can journal one page nightly titled, What Felt Most Real Today, and watch patterns reveal the true self. And once that door cracks open, the next question naturally follows. Why does science describe everything except the watcher? Some folks call this the hard problem, but labels aren't the point. The lived experience is. The reader may notice energetic hypersensitivity. Certain places, people, or music shift their energy fast, like an internal weather report. They may feel spiritual isolation too, not because they're broken, but because old conversations suddenly feel like reruns. A grounded example, after a loud day, a 10-minute breathe and scan practice can calm the nervous system and invite inner peace. As that calming becomes consistent, it tees up a bigger leap. Maybe awareness isn't a side effect, it's the starting point. When someone stops treating consciousness as a brain glitch and starts treating it as a clue, personal development accelerates. They begin to sense the higher self like a steady compass under the noisy mind. This is where awakening becomes less of a vibe and more of a transformation with consequences in daily decisions. They might simplify habits, less doom scrolling, more sleep, more water, because the body is the first instrument of spiritual development. And with the instrument tuned, the reader is ready to examine what science can do well and where it hits its limits. Topic 2. Science's edge. Science is brilliant at measuring structure and behavior, and that's not an insult, it's its superpower. It can describe the brain's signals, but description doesn't automatically equal explanation of subjective experience. So the honest move is to respect science without forcing it to answer questions it wasn't designed to answer. A practical example. The reader can separate what happened in my body from what did it mean to me in their journal. That separation creates clarity, and it quietly prepares the mind for ideas that sit between physics and philosophy. Sometimes people try to win by saying science can't explain anything about consciousness, but that's not helpful. A wiser approach is to admit the mystery while staying disciplined. Don't swap evidence for wishful thinking. Still, it's fair to say something is weird when the most intimate fact experience doesn't fit neatly in the usual boxes. That tension is often the energetic portal where spiritual awakening begins. Pressure creates a crack, and light gets in. And through that crack, one strange idea walks in wearing a lab coat. Maybe mind is fundamental. This is where the reader can hold two truths at once. Skepticism keeps them safe, and openness keeps them growing. They can ask him what would count as evidence, while also noticing what's already undeniable. Awareness is happening now. That blend of rigor and wonder is the sweet spot for consciousness work and healing. A simple practice. Meditate for 7 minutes daily, then write one sentence. Right now, I am aware of. And with that steady discipline, the next topic becomes less shocking. Theories that treat consciousness as woven into matter. Topic 3. Panpsychism. Panpsychism is a view that treats consciousness as a fundamental feature of reality, not just something that appears in complex brains. It runs against the common assumption that mind emerges only when matter gets complicated enough. like a bonus level unlocked by neurons. To a reader on a path of awakening, that can feel oddly familiar, like spirituality translating itself into philosophical language. But the mentor's reminder is crucial. Fundamental doesn't mean human-like, and it doesn't mean every rock is thinking about taxes. It means the universe might have an inner aspect, even if it's nothing like personal identity. If the reader has felt energetic hypersensitivity, panpsychism can sound like validation, but it's not proof. So the practical move is to treat it as a lens. What changes in how I behave if I assume mind is everywhere? They might become gentler with animals, more respectful of nature, and less reckless with attention, because attention becomes sacred energy. That shift often brings inner peace, because the soul relaxes when it stops feeling alone in a dead cosmos. And once the reader lives that lens, the next topic naturally shows up. Can consciousness be measured in any way at all? Some researchers try to bridge philosophy and math, because experience without structure is hard to test. That's where the reader hears about models that quantify integration in systems, not as belief but as calculation. The interesting part isn't the number. It's the suggestion that consciousness might scale with how information hangs together. A grounded example. They can notice how fragmented attention feels painful, while focused attention feels like healing. And that lived observation sets the stage for a famous framework that tries to compute consciousness. Topic 4. Measuring Mind-Integrated Information Theory, IIT, treats consciousness as something related to how integrated and complex a system's information is, and it uses a quantity often called phi. In popular discussions of IIT, the provocative idea appears that consciousness might not be strictly biological, but tied to how systems are organized. That concept can spark a spiritual awakening because it reframes mind as pattern and relationship, not just meat and electricity. Still, the wise guide's tone stays steady. Models are maps, not the territory of the soul, so the reader can hold IIT as useful without turning it into a new religion. When someone hears phi, they might chase numbers, but the deeper lesson is integration. Where life is integrated, a person feels coherent. Where life is fragmented, they feel spiritual isolation inside their own head. A practical example, they can pick one daily integration ritual, like a screen-free breakfast, to unite body, mind, and higher self. This simple action often triggers personal growth because it reduces internal noise and increases self-knowledge. And as coherence grows, the question gets louder. If systems can be conscious, what about the whole universe? Some articles speculate that if the universe contains vast interrelated systems, then it might have enormous integrated complexity, at least in theory. This doesn't prove a conscious universe, but it does give the imagination a disciplined playground. For the reader, that's a bridge. Spirituality can stay poetic while the mind stays sharp. They can feel the calling without forcing certainty, which is a mature form of awakening. And once curiosity is steady, the next topic appears: quantum talk, observation, and why people get this part wrong. Topic 5. Quantum confusion. People often hear observer in quantum physics and assume it means human mind, and that's where the myths sprint in. A wise guide would say, slow down. Don't let catchy words hijack the search for truth.
Still, the everyday insight remains. Measurement changes what's measured, and participation matters in how reality shows up. A practical example. The reader can test participation psychologically. Notice how their mood changes the meaning they assign to the same event. That experiment won't prove cosmic consciousness, but it trains discernment, which protects spiritual growth from fantasy. The spiritual side of this topic isn't about particles. It's about responsibility.
If attention is energy, then where attention goes, life grows. Yup, that old idiom is old because it works. So the reader can practice attention hygiene, unfollow what inflames fear, subscribe to what elevates your soul, and protect the nervous system. This is healing that looks boring on paper but feels like enlightenment in real life. And once attention becomes clean, The reader becomes more able to sense the subtle, intuition, synchronicity, and the pull toward the inner world. This is also where the mentor adds a wink of humor. If the universe is conscious, it's probably not obsessing over anyone's awkward 2014 haircut. So the reader can relax, drop perfectionism, and treat awakening as a process, not a performance. That relaxation often opens a spiritual portal inward, where mysticism becomes less spooky and more practical. A grounded next step: meditate with a simple mantra. I notice, I allow, I learn, for 11 minutes. And as the inner space expands, the next topic becomes unavoidable: spirituality as a method, not just a mood. Topic 6. Spiritual practice. Spirituality isn't only candles and quotes, it's training consciousness the way a musician trains rhythm. The reader can treat spiritual development as skill building. Consistency beats intensity every time. A practical path: 20 minutes a day split into 10 minutes to meditate, 5 minutes to journal, and 5 minutes to walk outside in silence. This routine stabilizes energy, reduces anxiety, and builds inner peace without requiring anyone to believe harder. And once stability appears, the reader starts noticing signs of transformation that many people mistake for something wrong. As the true self surfaces, old identities can crack, and that can feel like loss before it feels like freedom. This is where spiritual vision begins, not superheroes, just clearer perception of what nourishes the soul and what drains it. Relationships might shift, cravings may fade, and the person may feel a calling toward service, creativity, or deeper self-knowledge. A helpful example: reading Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, can anchor meaning, while The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, can steady awareness. And as the mind-body recalibrates, the 7 symptoms of spiritual awakening often show up like checkpoints on a trail. The guide's caution matters here. Symptoms are not trophies, and mental health support is always valid when needed. Still, patterns exist, and recognizing them can reduce fear, because fear loves the unknown. So the reader can watch their experience with curiosity. What is this teaching me? Instead of, what is happening to me? That shift is personal development at its best, and it often creates real healing in the body. And with that curiosity alive, the next topic opens: the 7 symptoms, named, normalized, and put to work. Topic 7. 7 symptoms. Here are 7 symptoms often reported during spiritual awakening: heightened sensitivity, craving solitude, stronger intuition, identity shifts, vivid dreams, emotional release, and a hunger for meaning. They can appear gently or all at once, like the universe flipping on a brighter light. The reader might call it awakening. Their friend might call it a phase. Either way, the nervous system is adapting. A practical move: track these experiences weekly, rating intensity from 1 to 10 so the mind feels grounded in reality. And once tracked, the person can respond skillfully instead of reacting dramatically. Heightened sensitivity and energetic hypersensitivity can be managed with simple boundaries. They can reduce caffeine, add electrolytes, and spend time in nature, because the body is the doorway through the energetic portal. Craving solitude doesn't have to become spiritual isolation. The reader can schedule solitude like an appointment, then return to community with intention. Emotional release can be met with breathwork, therapy, or somatic practices, because healing is allowed to be practical. And when those supports are in place, intuition becomes less chaotic and more like guidance from the higher self. Identity shifts are the big one. Old goals stop sparkling, and new ones feel strangely already decided. That's often the soul pushing personal growth, like a coach who won't accept excuses anymore. A practical example: the reader can write 2 lists: what I do to be liked and what I do because it's true, and compare them. That comparison reveals the true self with almost embarrassing clarity, in a good way. And once the true self is visible, the next topic arrives: integration, turning awakening into a stable life. Topic 8. Integration. Integration means bringing spiritual awakening into work, family, money, health, and relationships. Otherwise, it stays a weekend hobby. This is where consciousness becomes lived reality. The person chooses alignment even when nobody applauds. A practical plan. Pick one micro-alignment per week. Apologize to someone, fix sleep, start saving, or stop gossiping. These tiny actions stack into transformation, and the universe tends to meet consistent effort with momentum. And as momentum grows, the reader senses that the spiritual portal was never outside. It was inside attention all along. A mature seeker learns to translate mysticism into habits. They can protect mornings, speak honestly, and create art, because energy wants expression, not repression. They can also serve, volunteer, mentor, teach, or build something useful, because spirituality without service can become self-absorption. This is how they elevate your soul while staying grounded, and it's the antidote to spiritual isolation. And when service becomes natural, the last loop opens. How to live as if the universe is conscious, without pretending to know everything. Living that way doesn't require certainty. It requires sincerity. The reader can say, "I don't know," and still live as if consciousness matters, as if the soul is real, as if healing is possible. That posture creates inner peace, because it stops the mind from demanding final answers before taking the next right step. It also keeps the path clean, open to spirituality, loyal to reality, and respectful of the mystery of the universe. And from there, it's time to tie it all together with action, because insight without action is just entertainment. If the universe is conscious, or even if it's just as if it is, then every choice becomes a conversation with consciousness itself. So what will the reader do this week to support spiritual growth? Meditate daily, repair one relationship, reduce one addiction, or start one meaningful project. Which of the 7 symptoms hit closest? Energetic hypersensitivity, spiritual isolation, or that quiet calling toward the higher self and the true self? If this sparked an awakening, what's the one action they'll take today to turn mysticism into grounded personal development and real healing? Subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so the next lesson can keep opening that spiritual portal. Because the universe doesn't reward curiosity that quits halfway.